Alright, so the Echo series is officially released on Disney Plus, and now we can finally talk about this show. And I gotta say, for the way that it's structured, and with the way that Marvel wanted to do this, and like adapting like Maya's story and her heritage into this series, and just telling her story in a unique perspective, especially being under Marvel's spotlight, and telling like a self-contained story while having a larger role like connectivity. It's just sort of interesting to watch, and I gotta say, this was a very good show. There are some few flaws that I'll get into, and just so much more. And so this will be my official non-spoiler review for all 5 episodes of Echo, and just going over the ones that I like, and even with the flaws and issues that I have as well. And so if you're new, then be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell so I'm on any future videos. So let's just get into it. And now, just going into the show, I really feel that with Maya's story, like as I mentioned, was told very well through a unique perspective, because like in the show, like her character is deaf, and just like all that just to American Sign Language, and just having Kingpin's presence involved was really great, and even with the first episode, it was so sort of good, and that was the one that I really enjoyed. I mean, plus with the addition of Daredevil, like we've seen in the marketing and in the trailers, is not really a spoiler, but even with the rest of the episodes, it's sort of all right, and even like those are like the flaws that I have, and even with the pacing, that were sort of good, but not like a great side of the MCU like we've seen. But again, this is like a self-contained story telling through the story of Maya Lopez, aka Echo, and just with the first episode alone, I thought it was like really pointless, and with the way that it tried to recap her story, especially from the Hawkeye series. I mean, if you haven't or have seen episode 1, I mean, or the first episode, you'll know what I'm talking about. But even with the entire series overall, I thought it was good. Like it was good, like about where Maya came from, especially from her Native American heritage, and just with her family and her background, it was all very touching. And now I want to talk about, most importantly, Maya Lopez, played by Alaqua Cox in this series. I liked her character arc and the way that her background is built, where she came from, even though that we saw her debut in the Hawkeye series. And I understand why Marvel was not like so confident in the show that they just dropped like all 5 episodes all at once on Disney Plus. Plus, I like the TVMA rating. They decided to go for the dark and cruel violence, and that we're not used to seeing, like for the overall side of the MCU. It felt like now one of those generic like mediocre projects, but even going into the show, I liked having that dark rating, that dark mature rating, and just having some sort of violence being brought in like a TV format. It kind of like reminds us of like the Daredevil series or the Pusher series, or even out of any show in general with that dark rating, and even learning about her background and sort of violence that like goes down. And even like it's a good show in any ways, but even with like the flaws that I have with, once we get into the later episodes with 2 3, especially with out of any episode, it sort of lacks pacing. Like I feel like it's rushed, and even with the short run times like that are in the episodes, like I feel like they could have expanded upon it a little bit more. But even with her family and the way that the story is played out, and with all the people that were after Maya, and all the connections that actually has with these bad guys, and I just like her family and how everything was played out. And on top of that, with the characters that are introduced in the show who Maya interacts with, it's sort of interesting where she comes from, and especially through American Sign Language, and with the issues that I have with the flaws, in that it's too much plot, it's too much, and not knowing what's really going on. But this is a very good show, and even with the relationship between Maya and Kingpin, and I like their time on screen, even with the certain parts that I really liked, and just the highlights of the show is really just Kingpin and his presence, because he is Maya's uncle, and from what we've seen in the marketing in the trailers, like this is like a dark and violent Kingpin that we've seen from the Netflix Daredevil series, and the way that his story is told. But I mean, I think once it really gets to like, I think like the fourth episode, we really got to know his story, really where he came from. It really sets up more of his presence in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and especially for Daredevil Born Again, and it really lays the groundwork for both Daredevil and Kingpin, and for all the other Netflix characters. And I really like we really get the tone and just and even with everything else with the fight scenes. And it was very brutal at the start, especially from the first episode. But even as it continues later on, like you sort of like don't get that like sort of action, especially in like the middle episodes. And like I enjoyed everything about it, but even as everything sort of like a build up towards those fight scenes, I feel like all that time was like rushed or like wasted or any means. But it's sort of like a mixed bag for me. But I really enjoyed the fight scenes, and those were the highlights for me. And with the story and the dark tone is really told well, especially in TV format. And also, even as it gets to like the last episode, the fifth one, we totally see how it all like built up, and it really comes together. And plus, like there is a post-credit scene that definitely do not want to skip, because I think it sets up so much more, especially for Kingpin. I mean, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. But it really lays the groundwork for all of the Netflix characters to be canon to the MCU, especially with Daredevil and well the MCU continuity that really wants to bring it all together. And even like if I don't know if I would like rank them, but even with the first episode, which I had fun with, and even the other episodes that had the fight scenes, which is building up towards, I just really enjoyed everything that had to offer, and it was really refreshing. And like people were saying you had to watch like so many shows in order to understand this character, or movies to understand this character, but this is a totally refreshing story in its own self-contained thing of why Marvel wanted to do this. And I was really impressed for what the show had to offer in its unique ways. And so for my final thoughts is I really enjoyed Echo. I thought it was a very good show. I enjoyed all the fight scenes with its TVMA mature rating and that having that dark tone, and there's and the violence was like brutal, and I enjoyed the presence of Kingpin, learning more about Maya's background and her heritage, and just with the overall story. And it was really intriguing, and with the way that it sets up so much more down the line, especially with Daredevil Born Again, especially after that post-credit scene. But this makes me even more excited for what Marvel Spotlight has to offer for all these characters that have not been introduced yet into the MCU, to give them their own self-contained story without kind of to anything but having its own story in between. So yeah, I really enjoyed the show, and I recommend it to all you guys that are not the speed but just want a self-contained story as well. And so that is going to be it for this video, and just let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below, and just what are your thoughts on Echo, all 5 episodes, and give me a rating to 1 out of 10. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe and turn on notifications about future videos. And also follow my social, which are linked down below. With that, I'll see y'all next video. Peace.